Welcome back on Sportsbit Betting Insight today. Paulie and Teddy. It's Wednesday, June 29th. Big game breakdown is going to be the Rangers and the Yankees, Royals and the Cardinals. Team previews, deep dive, the Cleveland Browns, and the play of the day. Oh no! A moose in Cincinnati. Horrible beat if you had the Reds plus a run and a half, and a horrible push on the total. 2-1 Cubs, bottom of the ninth. Nobody on, one out, 0-2 on Phillips. Rondon hits him with a pitch. He comes around to score on a base hit with 2 outs in the ninth, and then all hell broke loose in the 15th, Teddy.
Yeah, and we've been talking about that Cincinnati bullpen and making fun of that Cincinnati bullpen all year long. And what did the Reds bullpen do? They came in and they threw 8 1/3 of scoreless ball versus the Cubs. And then, of course, they cracked in the 15th. Let's say this much. The Reds bullpen has been a completely different unit since the starters began coming off the DL. Well, that leaves the pen much fresher on a nightly basis. They still have the worst bullpen ERA by a wide margin. It was 6.11 going into last night's game. The number 29 team, the Rockies, are at 4.79. That tells you how far Cincy is when it comes from the rest of the league in bullpen ERA. But that is a misleading number as of right now. The bullpen is better. That being said, what a moose, man. When this pen melts down, they still melt down really bad, and nothing worse. I mean, that total got bet up from 8.5 to 9. Imagine if you bet it early, had under 8.5. You didn't get the best of the number. You're sitting there going, "Oh, I'm feeling good."
Yeah.
Not so
Good
much.
point
2-1 in the ninth. Yeah, you're supposed to cash an under ticket in that game.
Yeah, that was wild. Madden had Strope and Wood playing left field. I mean, that was crazy how that game played out. A tough one for the books, the Indians. I mean, Believe Land is real. 11 in a row, their longest winning streak since 1982.
Oh, they got crushed on that ball game. I mean, the Tribe with Kluber opened, about a minus 165. It closed as high as minus 240.
Oh.
And we've talked about Cleveland a lot on this show, and I continue to think that the Indians have the feel of a World Series type team, man. I like this Cleveland team. One thing we haven't talked about is how they're getting the job done defensively. They didn't have an extra base hit last night. They scored 5 runs without an extra base hit. But the defense now up to number 4 on the full season charts.
The books got some of that back. Finally, late June, the Twins get a shutout. They beat the White Sox.
Yeah, first shutout of the season for Minnesota. And, of course, the White Sox took a bunch of money last night. They were bet up from minus 165 to minus 190. Kyle Gibson, who had not been good in any previous start, pitched very effectively against Chicago, and the Minnesota Pen with a couple of scoreless innings behind him. And look, Minnesota, they've been playing better ball the last really the last week. 5-3 the last 8 ball games. They've allowed 2 runs or less in 3 straight games. That run of overs was nice while it lasted, but it appears to be over. Yeah, pun intended. The bullpen not exhausted beyond belief anymore. That being said, I'm in no hurry to bet the Twins under tonight, not with Ricky Nolasco facing James Shields. No way. We'll talk about this game more when it comes time for the play of the day.
Follow us on Twitter at Paulie Howard and at Teddy_covers. Hashtag SportsBit. Here's 2 questions from the viewers. Number 1, this is from David. What are the pros and cons of just betting team runs? Seems like you'd make money if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and of course, just use the hashtag SportsBit. We will answer questions periodically. It's not going to happen on every show, but we will answer them regularly. So David asked, what about betting team totals? Just betting the team runs scored. You can make money if you know what you're doing. And yeah, in theory, you're supposed to be able to make money if you know what you're doing in any sport, in theory. But there is one significant problem with team totals. Let's call it 2 problems with team totals. One is that you do run into much lower limits on team totals because it's considered a prop wager as opposed to your straight bets. And the bigger problem is, of course, the higher juice. You can often lay 105 either way for sides. It's called a dime line that you have in baseball. You can usually lay minus 110 either way on totals. But team totals are standard minus 115 either way, and that extra juice really adds up. So I use them sometimes, but I do not use them as a big piece of my daily baseball portfolio. Understand why you'd want to get involved, but again, that minus 115 or higher does add up over time.
Okay, one more. This is from the Duke, at the Duke. Force Nitrogen Sports to change their unfair baseball betting practices by not offering listed pitchers on any bets.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate I wish I could. You sportsbook, you got to do this. The sportsbooks aren't going to listen to me. They're not going to listen to you, Paulie. They're not going to listen to anyone, including their clients oftentimes. But you have the choice to vote with your dollars. We're not going to force any sportsbook to change any policies. But we can decide where we're going to put our money. If you don't like your book's policy, they don't offer listed pitchers, that to me is not a book I would be interested in making baseball wagers at. If you don't like your book's policies, find another book. And of course, we're doing the show right here on sportsbookreview.com. Just look at the friggin' name. There's plenty of choices right here.
Yes. Up next, big game breakdown. We'll start with the Yankees and the Rangers. Coming up on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRpicks.com.
Make sure to catch today's MLB Odds Couple Show Wednesday, June 29th. These second half plays, I'm cashing them and cash them all year long. Got two more Mike Brenner.
I know you do.
Two more Mike Brenner that I'm liking. Maybe they'll split, but overall, I think they're good plays. So catch the show today, the MLB Odds Couple Show Wednesday, June 29th.
Don't miss it.
Back on SportsBit, as always, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. We start with the Rangers and the Yankees. It's Martinez against Tanaka. Yankees $1.95, 8.5 the total. Texas has had a great run, and they won again last night. But Darvish, Lewis, Holland, all on the DL, and that means a lot of starters' innings are now open, Teddy.
Yeah, and starters' innings that have to be eaten. I mean, you think about that incredible ninth inning following that extended rain delay on Monday, and then they beat up on the Yanks in the latter stages again last night. Texas is hitting. The Yankees, not so much, but the Rangers right now have the major issue with the starting staff. And the Texas injuries to their starting rotation are a big part of the reason why they've been so profitable this year, because they don't have the starting pitchers that attract the betting market support. They don't have the name guys healthy, and that's very much the case here with Martinez. But it's worth noting, the Rangers, they don't just need quality starts, they need quantity of innings, because that bullpen is not ready to take on a bigger load. You look at the picture right here, and then look at the graphics. The 2016 Rangers bullpen, number 28 in ERA, number 29 in fielding and independent pitching, and number 25 in wins over replacement. That is not a good bullpen, Paul.
So they need Martinez to go deep, and that's something he doesn't do. He's 13-20 with an ERA of 4 and change, with a FIP of over 5 in 278 MLB innings. He doesn't miss bats, 3.5 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched this season, and 5.1 for his career. Even on good days, he doesn't last that long. 47 starts. He's finished the 7th inning 6 times. Never into the 8th inning. Yankee Stadium, not a great place for a right-hander with a low strikeout rate. And then you look at the Yankees, they're getting what they want from Tanaka, an ERA of 3, but 12 of his last 13 starts, he's gone at least 6 full innings, Teddy.
Yeah, and again, 6 innings is still the magic number for the Yankees to get to those bullpen aces, even though Chapman had a rough time in the rain the other night. But for Tanaka, we're talking about a guy that now has just a walk and a half, 1.5 bases on balls per 9 innings, over 389 major league innings. That's a chance to be one of the all-time elite pitchers for Control. I understand that the Yankees, that Tanaka is going to be favored over Martinez, but boy, Paul, I can't get to the window laying this type of price with the Bronx Bombers against a Texas team that just keeps winning.
No, not when you're up 31 units back in the Rangers, and they win every night, especially the comeback Monday, and then Hamels did it again last night. Game number 2, live odds, sportsbookreview.com, the Royals and the Cardinals. It's Volquez against Martinez. Cardinals $1.65, 8 the total. So it's a shuffle over the I-70 series for these teams, but there's a recent shuffle here between these pitchers as Volquez has been down, and here comes Martinez now back on track.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the series shifts from Kansas City to St. Louis after 2 games in KC. But let's talk about the shuffle of the 2 pitchers, because 2 starts back, Edinson Volquez left the game with a 3.90 ERA. That same ERA today is 5.15. So what happened? Well, he was left in a little bit too long. 2 games back versus the Tigers. He ended up giving up 3 runs in the 7th inning. Only got 1 batter out in that 7th. They pull him after 6. None of those runs come, and obviously none of them get attached to his ERA. And then really, he had the disaster of his MLB career versus Houston last time out. Paul, run through those numbers. They're sick.
15 batters faced, 3 outs, 12 runs, 11 earned, 8 hits, 3 walks, 1 home run. Gave up 9 runs in the first and allowed the first 3 batters to reach in the second before he was pulled, and they all scored.
Yeah, that's brutal. So now we have to ask, I mean, this is a legitimate question to ask as a handicapper. You say, how much weight do you put on one game that's so far out in the realm of everything else that he's done? Here's a guy who had an ERA of, basically, like I said, 3.90 just 2 starts ago. Now we're talking about an ERA over 5. So his fielding and pitching numbers, 4.24. That might become the better stat for Volquez to use moving forward. It's going to take a long, long time to get those 11 earned runs in one inning off. It's never going to come off his ERA, but even to bring it back into the realm of normalcy, it's going to take a while. So at least for the time being, this is one pitcher who I'm not interested in what his ERA is. I want to know the advanced metric numbers for Edinson Volquez.
And meanwhile, Martinez has really turned it around after a disappointing start to the season.
Oh, you're not kidding. You look at the first 9 starts, and this is a guy we talked about, how the velocity was there, and if he can get it together, he may well be a bet-on hurler. And the Cards have been pretty good at figuring out how to get young starters to figure it out. Martinez is doing it right now. Look at the numbers. First 9 starts, 4.25 ERA, more losses than wins. His last 5 starts, he's got a .124 ERA, 3 wins, no losses. And you look over the last 30 days, who are the best pitchers in baseball the last 30 days? No Kershaw's on there, no Strasburg's on that list, none of the big names. Michael Fulmer at the top for Detroit, Carlos Martinez number 2 for St. Louis, and I guess Jose Fernandez for Miami is a pretty big name. But when you look at Martinez, the strikeout per 9 innings, the swinging strike percentage are still below previous levels, but the guy is eating up innings right now. 7 full innings pitched in 4 of his last 5 starts, and the ground ball rate up to 57.6%. He's not giving up fly balls. That ground ball rate, number 5 in all of baseball.
Yep, liveoddsportsbookreview.com. Up next, team previews. Cleveland Browns and the play of the day on SportsBit. Betting Insight today.
Always on the go? Bet365 has one of the top mobile platforms in today's market. Sign up today and don't let your busy life keep you out of the game.
Back on SportsBit, some great news to report. We got Ian O'Sullivan on Friday's show, cycling betting expert on the Tour de France. And then the following week, UFC 200 breakdown with a guest and 4 parts coming at you. Mr. College Football, Phil Steele. We'll go over the top 5 power conferences and who to bet on and who's going to make the playoff. All that coming up next week on SportsBit. All right, to the Cleveland Browns. Win total 4.5. 40-1 to win the division. Oh, man. Last year, 3-13 straight up, 6-10 ATS, 8-8 to the over-under. This team was favored 4 times last year, 2-2 straight up in ATS. Closed on a 2-8 ATS slide. Mainstream stats, 25th in total offense, 27th in total defense, -1 yards per play. That was 32nd, 28th in turnover differential, -9. Now, this is pure insanity. They hire Hugh Jackson, who is against the analytics and the advanced metrics and the staff as well. Then they go out and they put a bunch of advanced metrics guys in the front office, Teddy, and guess what? They're butting heads already.
Yeah, it didn't take long. Let's start with a little bit of a recap of what we just talked about. The over-under 4.5 win total for 2016. There's fairly heavy juice on the over. And you say, why is there fairly heavy juice on the over for the worst team in the NFL? 2 reasons. 1, their schedule's pretty easy. And 2, at the margin, at the very low, the 4s, the 4.5s, the 5s, every year they take over money. The markets tend to think that even the bad teams find a way to win 5 games, although Cleveland a year ago, an abysmal team, only found a way to win 3. So we talk about Hugh Jackson as being the analytics guy. He's not even maybe an analytics guy. And it's not just Hugh Jackson, the head coach. His staff is not made up of analytics guys. Not even maybe. These are old school football, And then Paul DePodesta, hired the new strategy manager, the advanced analytics superstar from Major League Baseball. You remember him. He was played by Jonah Hill in Moneyball. So A doesn't mess with B, not even a little bit. You mentioned that there are already problems with the coaching staff not implementing what the advanced metrics guys want them to implement. And, of course, it's flared up in the media already. This wasn't something behind the scenes. This is something that you and I were able to read about, which tells us this is a red flag. It's a big, big red flag. That being said, I like Hugh Jackson. And I believe, Hugh Jackson's not an analytic guy. That being said, I do believe that football could be ripe for the picking when it comes to advanced metrics gurus getting the right mix of players in their squad. But when you talk about the sports, I'm not convinced that advanced metric stats are going to measure the most important things for football. You're going to say, what are the 3 most important things for evaluating personnel? I don't want the measurables. I want how tough he is, how much leadership he has, and is he a good teammate? And none of those things can be measured, in my mind, by the advanced metric stats. So it's kind of an interesting discussion, Paulie. The advanced metric stats, there's hope for them in football, but I'm more of an old school guy. I'm actually more of a Hugh Jackson believer than I am in the staff that Cleveland has hired that will put the players on the field for Jackson to coach.
Meanwhile, the Browns made the right moves for the future, the far future. They traded down in the draft at every opportunity and being unwilling to outbid any suitors for their top 4 free agents, which of course means that long-suffering Browns fans will continue to suffer this year. Cavs win a title, Indians are live, but the Browns are going to stink again.
Yeah, they sure are. And look, there's hope. You know, they have 14 draft picks, or they had 14 draft picks this year. They had 8 draft picks in the 4th and 5th rounds alone. Next year, they get 2 number 1s, 2 number 2s, 2 number 3s, and potentially 4 number 4s. They get an extra 2nd rounder in 2018 from the Carson Wentz deal. Bill Barnwell, and Barnwell's the guy who I definitely read in the offseason. Quote from ESPN.com. Quote, this is an aggressive of a game plan as any one organization has executed in a single offseason in recent memory. In other words, Cleveland, they just got rid of everybody, Paul. Look at those offseason losses. But, of course, the aggressive game plan means, man, they're going to have a ton of draft choices to put a roster together that could be contending for something in, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years maybe.
What do you? I don't like RG3. He's a bad teammate, a lousy quarterback. I think all the credit went to Shanahan when they won the division. Check it out. There was a great piece on the Undefeated about RG3 and Shanahan basically saying that he wanted to be a pocket passer and he was not that type of a quarterback, and he was lost coming out of Baylor. And a simple 3-step drop, he couldn't do it. And Shanahan tried to work with him, and it worked out. And then ever since then, it got ugly in Washington. Snyder calling the shots as well, telling Shanahan what to do. But what do you think RG3 can bring to the table with the Browns, if anything?
Something. Look, you're going to say RG3 was no good coming out of Baylor. I remember a quarterback coming out of Baylor that, when healthy, led the Redskins to the playoffs and had them a 2-touchdown lead in the first quarter against a San Fran team that was pretty good.
Seattle,
sorry. Against Seattle, that ended up being pretty good. They were both pretty good that year. So I'm not going to say that RG3 could never play. Shanahan ruined his career, plain and simple. In my opinion, I think there's hope for him. That being said, I don't know if he's ever going to, I don't think he's going to be the same guy again after the playoff injury and his too soon return. What the problem was, he came back too soon and hurt himself again. But I say there's at least some hope for RG3 being serviceable, but he's got to be serviceable with a team that lost everything in the offseason. Again, the aggressive game plan.
Yeah.
Who'd they lose? Well, let's see. They lost safety, Tayshaun Gibson in his prime. They lost a right tackle, Mitchell Schwartz in his prime. They lost a center, Alex Mack, a Pro Bowler. They lost a wide receiver, Travis Benjamin, one of the top 2 weapons last year. Linebacker, Carlos Dansby. He started all 16 games a year ago. Dante Whitner had 14 starts at safety last year. He got released. Randy Starks had 14 starts in the DL. He released. Yeah, that is an aggressive get all the veterans off and start rebuilding today mode. No doubt, but that makes for an ugly, ugly-looking roster going into training camp, Paul, doesn't it?
3 new starters on the offensive line, 9 straight Pro Bowls for Joe Thomas, one of the most underappreciated runs of any player ever. They took 4 wide receivers in the draft, including Corey Coleman out of Baylor, 2nd and 3rd draft picks on pass rushers, and they're counting on Mingo to have a breakout season at linebacker, and Paul Kruger, who went from 11 sacks in 2014 down to 2.5 sacks last year. Hayden's coming off ankle injury, so the secondary's loaded with questions.
Yeah, when you look at this team on paper, they're the worst team in the NFL. It's not even close. You talk about you have Joe Thomas, but he's working with 3 new starters in the offensive line. You've got 4 wide receivers that are rookies that you're hoping to get something out of right away. You got Agba and Nassib, from Oklahoma State and Penn State. You're saying this is our pass rush, 2nd and 3rd rounders. Barcavius Mingo, you talked about him, and Kruger, who had only 2.5 sacks last year, and Hayden coming off the surgery.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there are questions everywhere on this team. And that obviously shows in their power rating number. Look, they come into the season, they're ranked number 32 in everybody's power ratings. They're only going to be on TV once all year. They have one Thursday night game. Every other game they have, they don't even get a 4 o'clock start. It's all 1 o'clock Eastern starts. So if somehow Cleveland turns out to be, quote unquote, not atrocious, you might end up making a little bit of money with this team. That being said, it's really hard to make money betting on very bad teams in the NFL, especially early in the season before the markets adjust to how bad they really are. You're not going to catch me, Paulie, betting on Cleveland in week 1.
Yeah, and last check, they had close to $30 million in cap space for this year. Plenty of chances to make a splashy move or two before the start of the season if they choose to use that money. What do you think of the schedule?
Well, last year, slightly tougher than average. This year, slightly tougher than average. The AFC North plays AFC East and NFC East. Their other 2 games, they have Tennessee and San Diego, not particularly tough in that regard. And again, every game they play, except that Thursday nighter at Baltimore on November 10th, is at 1 o'clock Eastern. They don't leave the Eastern time zone even once all season. Now, they do play 5 of their first 7 on the highway. They got a couple of sets of back-to-back roadies early on, so it's very easy to see a disaster start here, but it's easy to see a disaster finish as well. The Browns are pretty darn bad.
Early lean?
I don't bet teams under 4.5, but I'm sure as hell not betting this team over.
Okay.
I think Cleveland might offer some point spread value.
Okay.
If they're not ridiculously bad, but in terms of asking them to win games, no.
Yep. All right. Money time. Play of the day. We mentioned in the first segment we're going to get back to this game. Where are we going? Twins, White Sox.
Yeah, we got to go to the Minnesota Twins, and this one's all about Chicago. Look, it's Bryden Dozier. He's got 4 home runs over his last 3 games, 2 home runs last night. Now, of course, he gets to face James Shields. But the key stat here, the White Sox now 9-26 in their last 35 games, not started by Chris Sale.
Man.
The markets bet against him every time Chris Sale pitches. It's ridiculous. Doesn't make any sense to me. Sale wins, everybody else loses.
Uh-huh.
Minnesota's playing decent ball right now. Let's take the Twins minus 105, game number 965. That's the play of the day for Wednesday.
Very good. They could be the best team in the NFL this season. Pittsburgh Steelers tomorrow on SportsBit. Betting Insight today.